And we're live, and it's Bourbon Bounty here with West Coast Joe. Say hi.
Hi, Joe.
All right. We are going to talk to you today about the best straight bourbon whiskeys to give as gift this holiday season. And there's so many choices out there, but these are some that I would highly recommend. If you're looking for a recommendation on that, we're not going to go real long with this live stream tonight. This isn't going to be a marathon. We're not bringing anybody up on the panel. I didn't share it out. This is more like a regular video post. So to kick us off here, Joe and I went through prior to going live, and we selected out some bourbons here. And there's a reason I selected these bourbons, and there's a story behind each one. But before we get started, I will tell you the lowest price point that we have is they're above $50. All of these are above $50. Now, prices vary geographically, but if you're looking for a less expensive gift, there's some bottled and bonds out there that are, depending on what you have to spend. But normally, if you're giving a gift to dad or something like that, you want to spend about $50, at least.
Yeah, at least.
So we'll start in that bottom end range of maybe $55, 50 to, and again, prices vary geographically. But one I've picked out, of course, is one of my favorites. It's the Blade and Bow. And I know that Stitzel tries to say there's some original stuff in here from Julian Van Winkle. That's all BS. But what the Solera aging system does, and what they do is age this via that Solera aging. And what that means is they never fully drain a barrel. They will leave some whiskey in that barrel, and then they'll put clear mash back in there, or put it in a new barrel with the clear mash, and then but it's a reserve whiskey. Now it has to be a new charred oak barrels to be a straight bourbon, but this is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, Stitzel Weller, right here. So, but what happens when you put some of that already aged bourbon into that new mash, it just adds a layer of complexity to it. And this comes with keys, much like Blanton's has the Horsies on top. This has the keys on it, and you can collect all the keys over time. And it's a fun thing to do. So that one, and then I think, I don't remember all the price points exactly, but I'm going to recommend Henry McKenna 10-year bottled and bond. I believe this one's about $55, if I remember correctly. I have not reviewed this one yet, not officially, but we did have some before we went live, and I'm still tasting on it right now.
Yeah, we tried it tonight. It was very good. Mm-hmm. Very good.
It stands up, and it's 100 proof. Now, the Blade and Bow here is 91 proof. So proofs are going to be important here shortly. But of course, bottled and bond, it is 100 proof. Now, stepping up from that, I've got a couple over here that's going to hit the mid-range mark. These are 60s, I believe. If not into $70 to $75, depending on where you are. Old Forester, this is part of the Murder Row series. I've got a bunch of them back here. It goes 90 proof, 100 proof, 115 proof. This is your 1920. This is fantastic. I have a full bottle sitting right up there. I always keep a backup bottle of this. So, anytime I see the Old Forester 1920 out, I grab it. The other one I have now, this batch I have right here, this is Elijah Craig barrel proof. This is going to run you about $70. This particular one, they vary, is 127.2 proof, but this was batch B520. This is the one that made the big explosion. So, but I've heard the B521 is good. The A's are, they have A, B's, and C's. So, but this is fantastic. And if you can find one on the shelf, grab it for yourself or feel free to give it as a gift. And if you don't have anyone to give it to, I will give you my mailing address and you can send it to me. Another one here that I'm going to recommend is Rabbit Hole. Now, Rabbit Hole has several different kinds. This just happens to be a high gold. And this is a Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Now, this one comes in at 95 proof, but here's the deal with Rabbit Hole. And some of them are higher in alcohol than others, but Rabbit Hole doesn't distill as high, right? So a lot of times when they distill bourbon, it has to be distilled at no more than 160 proof. So they can't go higher than that. Now your neutral spirits and things like that, like vodkas and things, they can go up to 180 proof and some even higher. But these have to be distilled at no more than 160 proof. And a lot of times with your base bourbons like Jim Beams and things like that, they distill them at 160. They barrel them at 125 because that's the max legal limit that you can barrel them at. And then they let them age in mass quantities. And then they put them all together and then just water them down until they get to 80 proof. So that's your 40-80. 40% alcohol by volume, 80 proof. And that's why they don't have a lot of notes in them. This is full of notes, very full of notes, very good. And since we're doing a video on straight bourbon whiskeys, the other ones are finished bourbons and things like that in the Rabbit Hole lineup. And they have a rye, high rye, and things like that. But this is just the regular straight bourbon whiskey.
How much is that?
This one will run you probably about $70, $75.
So that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good bourbon. Then the one I'm going to recommend here, if you can find it, and depending on where you live, is the Garrison Brothers Small Batch. Now this bottle here around here runs me about 120 bucks. But this is 94 proof, so 47%. Some people don't like the high proofs. Some people, like my dad, he'd rather have the lower proof, but a lot of flavor. And what you're going to get out of this Garrison Brothers, and that's why I said the proof is important, is because this is only 94 proof, but this thing will pack a punch when it comes to flavor. So there you go. And they're very handcrafted, small batches. So the one I haven't mentioned yet here is the Smoke Wagon, uncut, unfiltered. This just happens to be batch number 40. Was bottled January 25, 2021. But to be clear, this is a straight bourbon whiskey, but this is produced in Indiana. All right, this is MGP juice. So the guy in Vegas procures his bourbon from there, but then he ages it, blends it, and all of that, and comes up with these bottles. The reason I recommend the uncut, unfiltered over the regular one, it does cost a lot more. That's about 85 bucks. But the notes explode. I mean, it is just a very punch you in the mouth, type of noted bourbon. But there's other ones back there. I know you were a fan of that Heaven Hill back there.
Yes,
but that was
definitely.
a store pick. Okay. So that wasn't your regular Heaven Hill. That's not, or Heaven's Door. I'm sorry, Heaven Hill. Well, I'm getting my
Heaven's
distilleries
Door, yeah.
mixed up with the bourbon names. But the Heaven's Door, this is one that West Coast Joe really likes here.
It's very good, very good.
This is a cask strength. It's
Kind of hard to find though.
126 proof, and you can see on the back it says D's. And this was purchased at D's Wine and Liquor or Spirits or whatever they call it in Knoxville, Tennessee. So, we'll travel for bourbon, but this is one that they were very proud of there in Knoxville. It was a store pick, and this is the hottest bourbon I have on my shelf.
It's
And
good. It's really good.
yeah.
Yes.
But that's a good one too. So now that we've gone over these picks, I will say, if you can find it, things like this Elijah Craig 18-year, This just says, "Man, I love you more than life," right here. But the price on that one is going to vary tremendously.
That'll say, I'm glad to have you as a friend.
Yeah. But you just look to pay 200 plus for that bottle if you can find it. But price doesn't always make a bourbon. But when you have these extremely sought after high price bourbons, what you get over these is that mouthfeel, that silky mouthfeel to it.
Yeah.
Like Pappy Van Winkle, the Family Reserves, things like that. And I've tried them. I've never purchased a bottle, myself, but in Kentucky, in Nulu, in Louisville, we paid $20 a pour for the Pappy Van Winkle, and just to see the bottle sitting there, was kind of amazing. And I wanted to hate it. I really did. And I was like, oh, people talk about the Pappy hype. Yeah, don't fall for it and all that stuff. Man, we tried it and it was fantastic.
A couple of those bottles go for the price of a car, though.
So, well, yeah, like I said, it depends on if you can find it. And now, where we are here in North Carolina, they can't jack the price up. It's state ran, ABC.
So they don't sell it here?
No, they really don't. But what they do is they have lottery. So they'll announce that they're getting, and a case on the Pappy Van Winkle is 3 bottles. So it comes in a box, but it has this divider thing in there, and there's 2 bottles over here and 1 on the other side. And there's a little empty space in there, So when they say that they're getting 8 cases for the whole state or something, they're getting 8 times 3, it's 24 bottles. But what they'll do is they'll do a lottery, and it doesn't cost anything to enter it, but you have to have a valid driver's license with a address in the state, and then you can go on and enter online.
You have to give me your bank account information too?
No, you don't have to do that. But if you win, you have to go to that store or that location, which if I got a bottle of that, and they sell it for MSRP, which is like $180.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I would drive all the way across the state twice and do that just to have that bottle. But, I had an app on my phone at one point in time called a Pappy Finder, and it kept telling me that they had some, and I would call, and they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. So I deleted the app, uninstalled it because it wasn't doing me any good. Hey, Heart Sight, how's it going? Shoeman Fu is on here, having some new riff single barrel tonight. All right. So, so to recap what I've done, I've recommended some straight bourbon whiskeys. We may do another show like this sometime at some point and recommend some blended bourbons like barrel and things like that. I may even recommend some ryes because there's some really good ryes out there.
Yes.
One that comes to mind is that barrel seagrass.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I have a bottle of Mammoth Distillery's Woolly Rye. That stuff's really good. I'm not a big fan of Whistle Pig, I can tell you. I mean, I paid $100 for the bottle. It was the 10 100 or whatever. It's 10-year aged, 100 proof, and 100% rye. And so they call it the 10 100 100, and I call it the 10 100 100 100 because that's how much it costs. So. But yeah, any other questions on stuff? I mean, there's some other bourbons. If I were going to recommend,
where'd they come up with that name, Whistle Pig?
I don't really know. And I know a lot about like where they came up with a lot of these names on bourbons, but I haven't really looked up Whistle Pig. I do know. I think they're like in Vermont or something, but they procure all of their rye whiskey from Canada. That's the one thing I do know about Whistle Pig. And then they procure all that and they buy it and then they blend it, bottle it, all that stuff, and then charge an extremely high price for it. But I also haven't tried the Boss Hog, so but I'm just not willing to pay $500 or $600 for a bottle.
Yeah, that's
because hard. I didn't really care for the 10 100 100. So I'm like, guys, if you can't give me an inkling, at this level, because it wasn't the base model. I mean, I bought one that was in the mid range, but I wasn't a big fan of it.
Yeah. So if you want to taste it, you just go to a bar that has it and just get it by the pour. And
Now, the best gift bourbon to give someone, if they like a bourbon, get them that, but like I'm like a buddy of mine likes Bullet, the regular old red label Bullet bourbon. So he did us a favor. We have a camper trailer and we were having work done here at the house. So he let me pull it out to his place and park it. He's got a little more room. And they were doing tree trimming and stuff like that. And because him and his wife let us leave the camper out there, we bought her. My wife drinks wine, and his wife drinks wine. So she picked a bottle of Pinot Noir, pretty decent bottle. And I was going to get him some Bullet bourbon, but I was like, man, I'm going to get him something a little better than that. I got him Yellowstone Select.
well, that's what he likes.
Yeah, but he really, really appreciated the Yellowstone Select. But I knew there were similar notes. And that's one thing there. If you want to know if someone really likes a bourbon and you're like, okay, here's what they like. Can you recommend something that they might like that's maybe a little better than this thing that they usually get, And but you're always going to pay a little higher for the barrel proofs, the higher strength whiskey. But you're also going to pay for marketing. You're going to pay for bottles. You're going to pay for stuff like that. There's some overpriced bottles out there that are really, really pretty, and the one is that Luca Mariano down there. I keep it on the bottom shelf. Now, it's not a bad bourbon. I'll tell you this. It's a procured bourbon. It's probably MGP, but they put it in this. They don't age it very long. They put it in a big fancy bottle. They spend all this money on all the glass work on this thing, is amazing. Not quite as amazing as Smoke Wagon here, with all the raised
Yeah,
stuff.
it's not as
on
good
it.
as a bottle.
But the problem is they are trying to sell it as a high end boutique bourbon, and it's just not. It doesn't have the notes. I did pick up. This is a Nulu Reserve straight bourbon whiskey, but they do a lot of state only releases. This was released Arkansas exclusive, and I picked that up on my trip to Arkansas, and 94 proof, But they do a lot of that type of stuff. That's always a good one. A barrel bourbon, though, I will say you're going to pay $100 for a barrel, and barrel's a blend. So it's not, and the reason it's not up here, one, it's overpriced, I believe. Most of the time. Now they have a bunch of different releases, and that Seagrass is their rye, and people are raving over it. And I know Todd and Andy on 21090, they talk really highly of barrel Seagrass. Now it's going to run you about $100, but I don't know. Not all of them are created equal. Pay for the hype. Yeah, pay for hype. Yep, you definitely can. But Shoe Man Fu was with me in Louisville when we paid the high dollar for a pour of Pappy. So Shoe Man Fu, if you're still watching, what did you think about the Pappy Van Winkle? You can pop that in the chat right quick. I know you were talking about Old Elk. That's a good blend. So is Breckenridge. Angel's Envy, it's all right. I think the Angel's Envy rye is better than the bourbon in the port wine barrels. It's a pretty bottle. It's got the angel wings on, you can see through it, and all that.
Another one that's not as good as a bottle.
You're right. Now, another one that I didn't review. There's the Jack Daniel's single barrel cask strength. But Jack Daniel's is technically, they call it a Tennessee whiskey, right? But they could call it a bourbon. The only thing that makes it the only thing that they do in Tennessee is they use a charcoal filter system with it. But there's nothing in the law that says you can't do that. But everything else, they distill it at no more than 160. They barrel it in new charred oak barrels. They age it for the appropriate amount of time. It is a bourbon, but they do this charcoal filter process, and it's like Antique 107 on steroids. Yeah,
it's a matter of pride.
Yeah, it is.
You got to call it a whiskey,
and I call it hometown pride. It's really home state pride, you know. But yeah, Jack Daniels and Uncle Nearest, like, you know, and Uncle Nearest is fantastic. Have you had any of that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I'll have to let you try some of that. I have. It's over there on the other shelf. I don't put it back here because they call it a Tennessee whiskey. So this is all bourbons. Oh yeah, and I did put West Coast Joe's logo up in the top corner up there by his head up there.
Yeah,
I took my little snifter down because I couldn't. I was trying to get 2 cameras going on this thing, and I was going to have one on him and one on me, and log him in with a different browser and all that. And when I plugged the other camera in, it jacked up both cameras, and I had to close everything and reopen it and all that. So anyway, I'll work on that. You're supposed to be able to use 2 cameras, you know, and I was supposed to be able to put them in and because I know you can change. Yeah, and the Uncle Nearest, yeah, awesome story. Yeah, sure is. And I got the little higher priced Uncle Nearest. There's 2 of them. I forget what it's called now. One of them's like super duper, you know. But yeah, I didn't. I don't remember it, but I know it's a darker label or something like that. But it's really, really good. But I have so many good bourbons up here, but a lot of them I don't know if you can get them or not. I know you talked about Buffalo Trace, and great if Buffalo Trace,
find it.
If you can find it, it's good, and if you can find it for $36, that's how much it's worth. You know, honestly, that's how much it's worth, and people rave over it. But the Weller, the regular one, the original wheated bourbon, you know, the green label Weller, I can go down to Georgia and buy a double barrel, you know, big ass bottle of that for shoot, $45 or something, you know. They just give it away, you know. It's like, but now you get into the Antique 107s and the CYPB and all of that, and the William LaRue's on the Buffalo Trace Antique line. If you can get anything from there, that's like winning the lottery, you know, getting that as a gift. But yeah, I mean, and any the most elite bourbons, you know, like the Old Forester birthday bourbons and things like that. And once you get past that, you're into years, and you know, this was a like a 2012 release, and you know, particular ones, and they don't even, I mean, they're not there anymore. You know, they're in collectors shelves.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, and you're going to pay out the wazoo for those things. I mean, I don't know what the most expensive price anyone's ever paid for bourbon, but I know that people have told stories about paying $10,000 for a bottle of stuff. And one of them was the Pappy Van Winkle Family Reserve 23. And the poor guy, his son was graduating college and he knew he really wanted to try that, and he wanted to try it with him. And boy, he, you know, second mortgage, whatever, he got a bottle of it. But yeah, it's always exciting when you first get your hands on it, but eventually it's all going to go away. And I'm about to have to pony up because I think I'm right here right now. That's how good this bourbon is. That's where I am in the bottle. This is my cigar bourbon right here, though. I love it with a cigar. But oh yeah, no, Scotch prices. You know, Scotch. I tell you, especially ones like the Macallan And I watch all these people review scotches. Now, I don't review scotch, right? I have scotch on my shelf over there. I have a few of them, but I don't review them. I don't dissect them. I don't like study them, and read up about all the different distilleries and all that stuff. But there's bourbons that are better than the scotches I have on that shelf. And I paid way more for that scotch than even some of the higher priced bourbons I have. And these are better juice than what's in that bottle. I mean, I'm sorry if that offends somebody, but it's all personal opinion. It's just, but some people get into it. And I think some of it has to do with buyer's remorse on some of it. I mean, if I had bought a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle for like, I don't know, $5,000, I'm not going to come on here and tell you it's shit because I just dropped $5,000 on it. I'm going to come on here and go, this is the best stuff ever. Because I'm going to try to convince myself as much as I'm trying to convince you.
Yeah, I wish I had known this before. My dad had a glass of scotch almost every night. And I would have loved to have come up to him and said, this bourbon's better than that.
Yeah. But, a lot of that, though, people talk about bourbon, being subpar or whatever. I think, to tell you the truth, bourbon, I could find many more notes out of a lot of bourbons. And there's all these different types, not just cereal grain, right? It's not just the wheat, rye, and barley. Just like with hops and beer, there's all these different types of wheat grain and a lot of different types of barley and a lot of different types of rye. And it depends on where you procure your grains from. And, and if like Rabbit Hole, that's another one about Rabbit Hole, is they malt all of their grain. And if you're not familiar with the malting process, what they do is they put it in water or moisture, and then get it to the right temperature, and they let it just start to sprout, and then they stop the process and then use it to make the mash, right? And what that does, and the biggest one, the most common one that is malted grain is barley, and it brings out more flavor of the grain. And it kind of changes the flavor just a little bit, but you'll get a much more of a nutty flavor out of a malted barley. So that's what, if you pick up like pecan and almond and those nut notes in there, that's typically coming from especially different strains or variants of barley that's been malted. Sour mash now, what they do is they use some of the old mash and then reuse it to make a new batch of whiskey, and it gives a little sourty note to it, but some people dig it, some people don't. Just like some people like higher rye bourbons, some people like more of wheated bourbons or low rye or no rye. I'm not a huge fan, but like I said before, I don't kick any bourbon out. I'll if it's a real bourbon, I like it, but I'm not the biggest fan of like really, really high corn bourbon. And the one that comes to mind is this one right here. It used to be, and I have a bottle somewhere, the baby bourbon, but this is the new one.
It looks generic, doesn't it? It looks like it just say bourbon on the front.
Yeah, but this is Hudson. This is the they changed the name to Hudson Whiskey New York Bright Lights Big Bourbon. And the mash bill on this, I don't know if they put it on here or not. They do not, but they use New York corn. But I do know that this one is 95% corn, 5% barley. The Hudson Baby Bourbon was 100% New York corn. So I'm not a huge fan of it. So, not the biggest fan of it, but like I said, I'll drink it, and I keep them on my shelf because I need to go back and visit them every once in a while. So make sure that I'm up on all my notes and I can bring you good information.
And he's got a load of good information. Let me tell you, I'm a newbie and learned a lot in the past few months.
Now that's another thing too with the scotches is Shoe Man was talking about. I'm getting smoky notes. The closest I have a Jura over there, and it's not an Isla, but it's an island, but it's I think it's Speyside or something like that. But what it's classified as.
Mm-hmm.
I like more of the Highlands. I mean, that's kind of where I gravitate to because they don't peat. They don't use that peat smoke in it. And I think you can overdo it. I mean, and if I'm comparing scotches and going back to back, if you try the Jura on its own, it tastes really good and you don't really get a lot of smoke. But then if you try a different one like a Dalmore from a Highland Scotch and then go back to the Jura, that smoke will hit you because you're going back and forth. But it'll really pop the notes out a little more. But there's some out there, some Islas and things like that, scotches in that region. And like I said, I'm not an expert on Scotch, but I do know a few of the regions or whatever. And the only reason I really studied that is because I love Japanese whiskey. And the Japanese went over and like Hibiki and those type of whiskeys, they went over and studied in Scotland and then brought back the knowledge and local sourced everything and made whiskey in the style of Scotch in Japan. But it's really, really good.
I have a couple of friends that like Maker's Mark. What do you think about that? I'm
not a huge fan of Maker's Mark. It's a hit or a miss. They do a lot of store picks with Maker's Mark. And I think if I could go in and pick a barrel or something, and they Maker's Mark's one of the only ones that will let you come in and buy a barrel.
Really?
Yep. They now it's costs a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I know guys who've gotten together, like 5 or 6 of them, and they went and took they take you in there and they let you taste 2 or 3 barrels, and you tell them which one you want, and then they'll slap the label on it, and excuse me. And then what they do is they let it age to a certain point, and then when it's ready, they bottle it or blend it down, bottle it, whatever, and then they'll ship it to you. Now you're paying for all of this, but you have to have a name. Like we could get together and say the NC Boys, and they'll put that NC Boys on there. This is
that's cool.
A pick, right? But it's a private select, thing. But the way that they do it though is they have different things like Maker's 46. Mm-hmm. It's aged in new oak charred barrels like it's supposed to be, but it's a finished bourbon. So they technically what they're supposed to do is put it in a different barrel and finish it, like a port wine barrel or a Cabernet barrel or something like that. But what they do is they just put French oak staves down in the barrel with mm-hmm. it and let it age with that wood floating around in there, and it's okay. I think it has a few more notes than regular Maker's Mark, but like I said, I'll drink any bourbon. And I used to get Maker's Mark when I would go out to places because Woodford Reserve to me is a little too sweet, just for my taste. I mean, I like it sometimes, but I'd rather have the bite of Maker's Mark. But if they have Bullet or something like that, if they have a little selection, I'll get Knob Creek over Maker's Mark, if they have it on the shelf.
Okay, good stuff.
But I don't knock anybody for liking it. It's got a pretty red wax on top. Yeah. But no, the other one I was going to mention, as far as blended bourbons go, I know Shoe Man Fu turned me onto this one. This is Burning Chair right here. And if you see this on the shelf, my only downside to this is I don't know how much bourbon's left in here. It's just, I can feel it's heavy, but I know I've had several drinks and I can slosh it and I think it's about right here, but you can't see, it's just solid black, right. So, it depends on how heavy the glass is, but you can't see it. but it is
You should put a little meter down there.
well, it's a pretty color in the glass. I can tell you that. It has a really good amber color. It's 44%, but this is finished in Cabernet barrels. California wine Cabernet barrels. And it's a really good flavor to it. It's a little higher price too. It might be, but like I said though, we were talking about gifting straight bourbons tonight, but we'll do another one on the blends, and we can talk about those.
Sounds good, man. Yep.
Now, the only thing I'll caution people on is to be very careful about buying just bourbon, because straight bourbon. So bourbon by law, no more than 160 distilled, no more than 125 proof going into the barrel. The reason that some of these are higher proof than 125 is because water will soak into the wood and leave the alcohol more concentrated behind, so that you can have it up to in the 130s on some of them, depending on the wood and the char and all that stuff. And then but it has to be, the mash 51 or more percent corn in the mash.
Mhm.
It can be 100% corn, but the other grains have to be cereal grains, which is your wheat. Typically it's going to be wheat, malted or barley and rye, right? So then it has to be aged in new oak charred barrels. But bourbon can be aged a couple of months in that barrel, and then they can bottle it and sell it as bourbon. Straight bourbon, on the other hand, has to be aged at least 2 years. And if they don't age it for 4 years, they have to disclose the age of the bourbon somewhere. They used to have to put it on the bottle. And I found out recently they don't have to do that anymore. They're lax on that. As long as they prominently display it on their website or something like that, or in the marketing or whatever, they'll say like 2 years, 8 months or whatever. It can still be called a straight bourbon whiskey, but they have to disclose that age. Now, it could be a 6-year bourbon, and they don't have to tell you. But there's the other thing I'll say, be careful of, is blend of straight bourbon whiskeys. And they'll say, this is a blend of straight bourbon whiskeys, a blend of 2-year something, like 6-year and a 9-year. Well, you're probably getting a drop or two of that 9-year in there. So you're mostly getting the younger.
Way to do it, though,
Yeah.
huh?
But they don't have to disclose the other ages, on the other that they used in the blend, but they do it for the marketing, because if they say this is a blend of straight bourbon whiskeys aged at least 2.5 years, then you're going to think, well, this is a blend of 2.5-year bourbon, right? But if they go ahead and disclose the higher years that they aged, now your brain takes you to, ooh, this is a combo, type thing. But I'm telling
Marketing.
you, yeah, it's marketing. But yeah, they could throw one 9-year barrel in a whole big batch and be like, it's got some 9 in there, So, but they know what they're doing when they do that stuff. But most of them, they have to stay within the law, because there's too many people like me out there that's going to call them out, and we're going to say, oh, that's not right, and it is like congressional, federal, registry. I mean, this is a law.
That's right.
And but Scotch, in that law, Scotch is named. Scotch has to come from Scotland. That's why Japanese whiskey is called Japanese whiskey, because they can't call it Scotch because it didn't come from Scotland. Or they wouldn't be able to sell it here in the States, if they did. I know I hear a lot of people talking about, have you had Japanese Scotch? No, nothing, no such thing exists. Now, I will say, if you want to know, and it's a good gift idea as well, the Legent is this is a
I looked at that one.
yeah, this is a Shinji Fukuyo, right? Master blender. or he says chief blender on here. But this is a Fred No bourbon that was blended by a Japanese blender. And so this is like supposed to be a fusion, but it's also finished in wine and sherry casks. So it says partially finished. So I don't know if they reserve some back, some barrels back and then finish some barrels. That's the way I would read this, as partially finished. So, but this is definitely a blend. But it is a very unique.
How much is that?
$65.
That's not bad.
No.
There's another gift idea.
Yeah. But yeah, it's I like it. I like it. But it is a finished bourbon, partially finished. And that's another one we'll do. Instead of blends, we'll talk about finished bourbons too. But yeah, that's and then I have a lot on my shelf that just say bourbon on them, but most of what I have back here says straight bourbon, but this one is not even a bourbon. This is an Iowa whiskey. But Japanese, as they get really serious. Oh yeah, they do. Yep. Yeah. Let's see here. This is a blend of bourbon and whiskey, and I read about it, but it's not on here. Distilled and bottled by Cedar Ridge Distillery. That's another thing to look for when it says distilled and bottled by. If it just says bottled by or produced and bottled by, produced does not mean distilled, right? So
it shouldn't be distilled and produced in the same place?
No, it can, but I'm just saying that's how you know whether you're getting a procured bourbon or not. If someone's buying their bourbon, and typically, from what I understand, most of the time the way it works is the places that really produce a lot, like MGP, they don't age the stuff there. They just have the distillery going and everything, and they have a area where they have barrels ready to ship, but they get it in the barrel and then it goes to you, and they'll label it with your brand.
That's pretty awesome.
And then it's up to you to do with it after that, But yeah, the Japanese, that's why sushi's good. Some people don't like sushi, but I love sushi. But,
I do too. It's awesome.
But I had it in Japan. I lived in Japan for 4 years, and I would eat Japanese, sushi in Japan, and they have to be certified. I mean, it's like not just anybody can open a sushi restaurant. They have to have.
Anybody can around here.
Yeah. Well, most of the time here, you don't have Japanese working in these places, because I'll walk in and I'll be like, Ohayou gozaimasu.
What?
Huh? Yeah. I'm like,
you're in the wrong place, man.
Yeah. But Nippon no hanashite kudasai. And they're like, right? So like, do you speak Japanese? So yeah, they're like, and then I'm like, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Korea. Yeah. Yeah, that Henry McKenna is good stuff. That bottled and bond, that 10-year.
So hey, if you
What's
don't mind,
the difference between bourbon and whiskey? Okay, so all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. And whiskey produced in Scotland is Scotch. Bourbon, on the other hand, has to be made in America. Okay, but there's a strict mash bill. You have to follow aging, new oak barrels. You can finish it and stuff. There's a lot to what makes a bourbon, but anybody can make a whiskey, right? Moonshine is the white dog. I mean, that's what all this starts as. And you can't add. As one of my other gripes is you can't add color to bourbon, but they can add color to Scotch. So we can tell a lot by pouring bourbon in a glass and holding it up and looking at the amber color or lack thereof. And you can't do it with Scotch. I know some of the lighter Scotches are probably natural, but some of the darker ones, it's just an eye trick. You know, if I know they gave these little kids colored water, you put a little food color in it, you know, and they had these little kids up there, and they're like, okay, it's very subtle, but tell me what flavors are these? And they would smell it and they would take a drink. Well, there's no odor or taste to it. They all taste identical, but they ended up like 90% of them would say cherry or strawberry on the red or fruit punch or whatever. And then, you know, it was all by the color. So, you know, sometimes that has something to do with it. But some of these bourbons are a lot darker than others. But a lot of that has to do with the aging, the char, whether they slow toast the barrel or blast char it, you know, things like that. But I know that a heavier charred barrel gives you sweeter notes in a bourbon. You'll get more caramel and stuff like that out of it, because typically the apple and sugary caramel notes comes from the barrel itself. And people think it comes from wheat, because a lot of these sweeter bourbons, you know, like the wheated ones, say, oh, this is a wheater. And they say, oh, well, yeah, I like the wheated bourbons because they're sweeter. But I've had some good non-wheater bourbons that were sweet, because most of that's the wood sugars coming out.
If you don't mind, I think I'd like to take a little trip down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, sure.
Let's give this a shot.
All right. Rabbit Hole High Gold. Like I said, they have other versions of it, but that's a good one right there. Yeah, and again, I'll mention it again. Rabbit Hole distills their bourbon close to what they want it to be. They don't dilute it. They don't proof it down with a lot of water. A little, but not a lot. So you're getting pretty much what they distilled.
That's good stuff, man.
And that's why the flavors pop, and it's only 95 proof.
That's really good stuff. Wow.
Yep.
Drink too much of that.
Mm-hmm. I just finished the rest of that Henry McKenna. That is fantastic, man. And the more I was drinking on it, the better it was getting. And again, that was the what I just tried. And I have not reviewed this officially yet, but I will probably either tomorrow or I think tomorrow, though, I'm going to do the last of the comparison between the 2020 and the 2021 BCS. And then I'll save this one for another week. But I had to open this because I had heard so many good things about it, and I just haven't had it yet. And I wanted to recommend it if it was good. So I tried it, and it's fantastic. I would highly recommend a bottle of it as a gift for someone that you really like. But again, it wasn't like extraordinarily expensive, but Bottled and Bond has to be 100 proof. So you know what you're getting. And one of the best Bottled and Bonds, I think, for the price. Now, I'm not saying it's the best Bottled and Bond. That kicks the crap out of it on flavor. But Old Tub is really good. It's
behind my head.
Yeah, it's over on the end over there. Don't worry about it. They've seen it. But Old Tub you can get for about $20.
There you go.
And for $20, I think it's one of the best cheap pours out there. Now, this one wasn't that much either. That's the Jim Beam single barrel. And I have a little old plastic, little old pint thing over there of Jim Beam. And I bought it to compare with these. And it just tastes like your ice melted in your bourbon. You know, it's like regular old Jim Beam tastes like to me. But if people like it, I mean, if that's all we had and we were out camping or something, yeah, I'd drink Jim Beam. Regular old straight up Jim Beam, but you can have a hell of a lot more of it. Have you guys heard of a thing called Southern Comfort? Oh, Lord. Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah. Southern Comfort. We call it Yeah, SoCo. That's what we used to call it, SoCo. And Southern Comfort is a schnappy type thing. You know, it's got whiskey in it, but it's a lower proof too. I think if I remember correctly, it doesn't even hit the 80 proof mark.
I don't think it does either.
And so they can't call it a whiskey. So it's more of a something else. What is Seagram 7 too? That's another rot gut.
Seagrams and 7. Huh.
Man, I couldn't imagine putting 7 up with Seagrams. That stuff's sweeter than freaking candy, you know. But yeah, it's kind of I refer to those more as a schnapps than a whiskey. But and they can't call it a whiskey because it's not 80 proof. Now there's a difference. There's a difference. Like rum is whiskey, Scotch is whiskey, bourbon is whiskey, and then there's Tennessee whiskey. But there's all kind of whiskeys, and a lot of that cereal grain stuff comes into that. Now, if you do it with something besides cereal grain, yeah, he says it's pretty nasty. Yeah. I mean, if you just want to get drunk, get some MD 2020 and go to town, you know, it's like, you're going to regret it tomorrow. But the thing with the other ones are called neutral spirits, right? So your vodkas and things like the gin, they can be made with things other than corn and cereal grain. I mean, because rye is whiskey, right? Mm-hmm. And rye is 100% rye used in the mash. That's why they can't call it a bourbon. Now, there is high rye bourbons that typically is going to be in the high 30% range to 40% range. Use rye as your secondary grain. Mm-hmm. As long as corn is the 51% or more, they can call it a bourbon, but the rest of it could be rye. So, I mean, technically you could have a 51% corn, 49% rye bourbon.
Do they?
I don't know. I haven't seen that. But yeah, like vodka is typically made with potatoes. You know, the other thing that's funny is the distilleries like to talk crap about beer. They said beer's for quitters because you have to make beer to make whiskey. You know, and that's how you make the mash and all that. Rum, yes, rum is whiskey. Yep. If made, certain rum can be called whiskey. Yeah, it depends. Because they can put stuff in there, like you know when they make moonshine and stuff, they can throw plums and stuff and throw
bugs,
whatever, but peaches, you know, and they throw apples. They do a lot. I know they have apple pie moonshine they sell on the shelf, but I'm from Arkansas, right? And I know what moonshine is, and I've seen it made up in the mountains in northern Arkansas. And those guys make their own apple pie up there, and it will knock you for a backflip. But milk vodka. Wow. I've not heard of milk vodka. Sugar cane. Yeah, it is. There's I forget now. I might be wrong on that rum. I said it, but I'm probably wrong on that rum.
Really?
Yeah. No. Another neutral spirit is tequila.
Yes.
And that's made a lot of times with agave.
That is a heck of a spirit too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, neutral or not.
I love a good tequila. I'll put it that way.
So that's kind of interesting. Milk vodka.
Yeah, I've never
heard of that.
I've not heard of milk vodka.
Yeah, does it work for people that are lactose intolerant?
I don't know. I can drink milk stouts. Yeah. Another thing, I mean, I like all kind of adult tasty beverages, right? So I like, I know my wife used to get port wine for Christmas. And there was one It was a raspberry port from Central Market when we were in Texas, and they would only sell it in this little skinny bottle, and it was like not near as big as a regular wine bottle, and it was like $50 for that little thing, but it was really high. Oh yeah. Or I even like mixed drinks. I mean, I'll drink them, but I like my bourbon straight, neat, you know. But if I'm mixing a drink, I use a cheaper bourbon. That's why I keep that Maker's 46. But no, I like a Maker's Old Fashioned every once in a while. But most of the time, I'm drinking it straight. Yeah. But I love a good margarita. But with good tequila.
Yeah, it's very good.
But I've digressed here. I'm going to come back on track. But my wife used to buy this port wine that was a raspberry, and I swear when you take a sip of that, it was like raspberry juice. I mean, you could almost feel the seeds in your teeth. You know how the little raspberry seeds get in, and there was no seeds in it, but it's just the mental thing. You know, it was so raspberry. And then she would make this raspberry chocolate thing. It was like a lava cake. And you cut into it, and that stuff just oozes out. And
that sounds good. Oh my God,
man! And it was like just a waistline waiting to explode, right? But I would have a piece of that, and drink that raspberry port wine with it. Oh my gosh, that was good. That was so good. Hey, Vanessa Kitty. But yeah, that was a treat. Now we moved out here, and the ingredients aren't here, you know, because we'd get everything at Central Market there. We haven't really looked for it, but traditions change, you know.
They do.
And I spend so much money. I think that lava cake and bottle combination, I think it costs us about $150 every year, you know, to make all that and have that one little bottle.
And it was worth it, huh?
It was. But yeah, I may have to talk about some recipes. I know that I had the Bourbon Burner series, and I had to hang that up for a while because my company got acquired by another company, and we were lots going on right now, and I just didn't have time to burn because it took me 2.5 days to produce the video, and so I would give up my weekend every single weekend. That's all I did was setting up. But I would shoot in the kitchen. I would come back in here. I would go outside on the grill, come back in here. And I was shooting it all in VR 180. And to have to move all these lights and the sound and the camera and the tripods and get everything set up. And you have to, when you're shooting VR 180, you can't just look in the focus of the camera. You have to make sure, you know, I didn't leave my Hustler magazine laying over there or something, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, you got to make sure there's nothing over there.
And, you know, so, and also some of the videos I've done, if y'all go back and watch some of the VR 180 videos, and there's not very many people watching, so I'm going to throw this out there on this video, is I had my whiteboard and I drew an Easter egg on it. And I put Easter egg at the top, and I put a prize on it, and I said, comment this. So if you find the video with the Easter egg in it, don't just go back and comment on all of my videos saying I saw the Easter egg, but just let me know you saw the Easter egg, and be the first one to comment that on the video. Then we'll discuss what the prize is. So there's
Sounds
that.
like a deal to me. I
Yep.
saw him put it there.
Yep. And yeah, it was right over there. But certainly not on this video. You can't grab the screen and move it. But we're going to go ahead and wrap this up, guys. We were just going to do a shorter stream.
Yeah, this is kind of fun. Yeah, and I think is it Cyrus?
Yeah, Cyrus.
Yeah, thank you, Cyrus, for that link. I'm going to learn something tonight.
All right. And with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And thanks for those who joined in. And hopefully we gave you some good information. And talk to you later.
See you later, guys.
And I'm going to play this I wasn't quite ready yet. Now we're ready.